Here's 40 shillings on the drum for those who volunteer to come to list and fight the foe today over the hills and far away. O'er the hills and o'er the plain, through Flanders, Portugal and Spain, King George commands and we obey, over the hills and far away.
Many motorists approaching from the south regard their sighting of Windermere as the beginning of the Lake District and head eagerly along the A591 until it comes into view, unheeding or unaware of a side road signposted Kentmere as they pass through the village of Staveley en route. By doing so, they miss the loveliest of the lesser-known Lakeland valleys. Kentmere is delightful in all seasons. Only a few dwellings cluster around the church, but populated outposts nearby help to earn for Kentmere the status of a village, although there is neither an inn nor a shop. This year, as well as the usual Joyce, Maggie, Phil and cameraman John, there is a new recruit in the form of Anne, who suggested that she might like to come for a little wander amongst the hills. Pity she didn't read the Wainwright before we started off. But like everyone else, ready to pit stamina and willpower against all that high-level mountain walking can throw at us. Unlike the ginger Moggy, who once he realised where we were bound for, beat a hasty retreat back to the village comforts. The first objective of the walk is Garban Pass, this to gain a foothold on the Ilbel Ridge, an imposing and effective barrier between the valleys of Troutbeck and Upper Kentmere.
You've done it, haven't you?
Yeah. At the last farmhouse of the valley, yet another furry friend is bid farewell to, and the path at last turns into open pasture, to begin the steady ascent to the summit of the pass.
We'd all come and stay with you for a holiday.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm sure you would all come and stay with us for a holiday.
In the first field on the left, having emerged from the tree-lined and view-restricted valley path, is a huge rock, apparently a craggy outcrop, but in fact a tremendous boulder that has fallen from the heights above, and is one of the largest in the district. It is known as Badger Rock, or Brock Stone. Until 1840, there had always been a shallow natural lake on the flat strath south of the church. It was known as Kentmere, 2 words, and gave its name to the valley. But in that year it was drained to provide more land for cultivation, a purpose not entirely achieved, much of the reclaimed ground remaining too marshy for the plough and even for grazing. The result of all this was the promotion of an Act of Parliament authorising the construction of a reservoir at Kentmere Head to ensure regular supplies of water to the many woolen and corn mills down the river. Garban Pass is thought to be a section of an old road that cut across the southeastern fringe of Lakeland, the path being of cart width, and this theory is supported by its naming as Garban Road on the Troutbeck side, where it is a lane between walls. In any event, once the summit has been reached, a sharp right turn sets the gang on the right path, narrowing as height is gained and leading up to the first summit proper for the day, that of Yoke. Immediately, a splendid prospect of the Coniston Fells, and indeed the greater panorama of the western and southeastern fells, suddenly unfolds after the limited confines of the climb up to it. Dropping precipitously from the summit plateau of Yoke is the tremendous face of Rainsborough Crag, facing to the east and being passed unnoticed by walkers traversing its top. Feeling just as precipitous and similarly exposed, particularly to the audience just the other side, the first major barrier of the day is attempted and ultimately conquered.
I don't think about it with little legs.
And by way of a reward, a halt to look back at the lovely Windermere Valley away to the south, and a pause for refreshment to put some energy back into legs not having been this badly treated since the last Lakeland trip a year ago. With renewed vigour, the expedition set off once again, although the girls decide to save their energy for later and bypass the summit of Yoke on a slightly lower path. For Phil, of course, there can be only one proper course of action, and it is as a lonely Sherpa Tenzing that he stands proudly on the summit of Yoke at 2,309 feet above sea level. From here, the first full-length view of the reservoir can be seen, completely devoid of water, showing just how little rainfall there has been so far this year. Once more, with the expedition joined again as one, the obvious route to the top of Ill Bell is followed, with the ridge beginning to narrow as height is gained, forming the perfect conical summit that gives the mountain its name. The summit of Ill Bell, at 2,476 feet, can be bypassed, like that of Yoke, along a lower level track that runs across the western flank, but is of unusual interest and commands such fine views that it should certainly be visited, and this time by the whole team. A multiplicity of cairns, 3 of long standing, augmented by others that have sprouted in recent years, crowd the small top and suggest that the summit has had some great significance in mountaineering history, or is the apex of a major rock climb, but in fact has no such distinctions. Nevertheless, it is a splendid airy perch, and with the ground falling away out of sight all around, gives the impression of an island in the sky. From the northern edge, there is a graphic picture of the continuation of the route, looking over the next summit on the ridge, Froswick, to its culmination beyond at Thornthwaite Crag. The walk lies along the crest of a profound drop into the head of Kentmere far below, the effects of erosion and landslips being much in evidence. The eastern slopes of Froswick in particular being a chaos of tumbled rocks and scree.
It was quite a climb, that.
Yeah. Quite nice up here.
A rough descent from the top of Ill Bell is followed by a gentle rise to the summit of Froswick at 2,359 feet. From here, tremendous retrospective views of the whole of Kentmere and the southern fells in general can be studied at leisure, the most impressive being a full-length shot of Windermere. The normal route from here on is to continue along the path, looking more like a motorway these days, and climb up to the next obvious peak, that of Thornthwaite Crag. However, for us, the route now takes a 90-degree right turn, thereby crossing from one mountain ridge to another, and time at last for another refreshment halt. Many of the paths found on the high tops can be attributed to sheep and the shepherds who are indigenous to the area these days. Much earlier, the Romans engineered paths to enable themselves to get from one camp to another. And of course, between these times, the local population needed routes to be able to trade between towns and move goods. And so paths were designed to take ponies, horses and carts. It is good to see wild horses as much at home on these fells as the tourists using the paths created centuries ago for a much harder use than pleasure. Once again, the girls feel the need to reserve energy for the return journey, and so Phil it is who strikes out for the next top, that of Mardale Ill Bell. From here, a new valley and lake come into view, this time Haweswater, another reservoir owned by Manchester Corporation, who flooded the valley and submerged the hamlet of Mardale in the process. But it is to the east we must go, heading to the last high fell of the walk, Harter Fell, and the depression of Nanbeald Pass that leads to its grassy summit.
My name is Tweezers.
Where's your halfpenny gone?
I've got his halfpenny.
Penny.
Penny.
This is as bad as Bev Maggie's foot, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Oh yes, that's right.
The camera bears up to those
Phil
feet.
doing my foot for me.
Having discovered that Anne has left a pair of batteries in her camera since the year dot, it falls to the collective skills of Phil and Maggie to rectify the situation. And finally, the expedition moves off to cross the pass. To the north, the water-filled corrie of Smallwater can be seen draining into Haweswater. Whilst to the south, the skills of those earlier travellers can be seen in the form of a path comprising of a series of zigzags to enable the gradient to suit the transport of horse and cart, connecting the valley of Kentmere with Mardale. Nanbeald means no shelter, and being such a small top, it is plain to see how it got its name. There is nothing to keep you here, particularly in winter conditions, and so the steep-facing slope of Harter Fell is the next objective on the agenda. At 2,539 feet, a mild shock awaits anyone reaching the top of the fell on a first visit, for there is a spectral weirdness about its cairn. The stones support an elaborate superstructure of iron fence posts and railings, which now act as an adornment that has a nightmarish quality, particularly in mist.
Another peak finish. The last one of the day.
It is finally all downhill from here on, the final summits of Kentmere Pike and Shipman Knots being easily taken in one stride, in the rush to find level ground once again. It is well not to anticipate a drink or a meal in the village, for as stated earlier, there is no local inn. For such deserved refreshment, it will be necessary to travel down the valley to Staveley or Kendal. it should be in the nature of a celebration for the accomplishment of a memorable walk.